was looking for the good in a fire that burned my house down. Was a light that led the way from my cold and lonely hometown. But now I'm growing up, I see anew by starlight. The monster in the embers will not be stopped by night. So I turn to lonely flight. By the light on my bridge is burning, I will cast aside my name. There's nothing left to hold me here in the last kingdom of my shame. And though I hear your chanting of die, 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 I will be your son no more. You don't deserve to have me try. Is knives in the land where empire started, in the graveyard of the future where the island soul departed. And your father told you lies about where to find your heartbeat, so you play the game of progress where there's only win or cheat. I'll embrace my first defeat. By the light of my bridge is burning, I will cast aside my name. There's nothing left to hold me here in the last kingdom of my shame. And though I hear your chanting of die, 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 I will be your son no more. You don't deserve to have me try. Still burning, I will wait beside the flames to make sure that there's nothing left of these old and bloody games. And every twisted empire that fell in ages past proves time's final whisper, let all dominion fall to ash. By the light of my bridge is burning, I will cast aside my name. There's nothing left to hold me here in the last kingdom of my shame. And though I hear your chanting of die, 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 I will be your son no more. You don't deserve to have me try. I was looking for the good in a fire that burned my house down. Was a light that led the way from my cold and lonely hometown. But now I'm growing up, I see anew by starlight. The monster in the embers will not be stopped by night. So I turn to lonely flight. By the light on my bridge is burning, I will cast aside my name. There's nothing left to hold me here in the last kingdom of my shame. And though I hear your chanting of die, 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 I will be your son no more. You don't deserve to have me try. Is knives in the land where empire started, in the graveyard of the future where the island soul departed. And your father told you lies about where to find your heartbeat, so you play the game of progress where there's only win or cheat. I'll embrace my first defeat. By the light of my bridge is burning, I will cast aside my name. There's nothing left to hold me here in the last kingdom of my shame. And though I hear your chanting of die, 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 I will be your son no more. You don't deserve to have me try. Hello, everyone. I'm Ted. Thank you for following. Welcome to the Fish Pond. Welcome to Satisfactory. The concept of this stream is that basically I'm going to try to give my entire history of capitalism lecture while playing Satisfactory, while doing capitalist things in Satisfactory, specifically doing some deforestation. Before that, while we're setting up, to kind of recap on progress, this is our mine and Lexi's Satisfactory file from before Christmas that we logged 250 hours in. We sort of just got to the start of the end game, and I want to give a quick update on things I've done since then. It's not much, because we were building this place, which is our aluminium factory, and it took 40 in-game hours. Like 40 hours on the play clock to do it. And even then it wasn't quite finished. Because I knew we would need a satellite plant for the aluminium factory to make batteries. So I found myself thinking about what sort of plant makes batteries. And I present, where are we? The battery. This was like 10 hours of work for that joke. Please clap. Also, it was a nightmare because this game is not designed for building vertically. But that is a fully functional battery factory in the shape of a tree because I think I'm funny. And it's already backlogged all our storage. But we're not here to build batteries, fortunately. And I don't want to give people a tour of the tree because, well, two reasons. One, actually climbing around the thing is pretty inaccessible. And two, some of the things I had to do to make it work are absolute crimes. So instead, we're going to go up there and do some stuff. Where's my ladder down? There it is. This, by the way, enormous sheet of concrete is where our endgame factories are going to be built when I actually get around to building them. I have to make an enormously complicated diagram first. But the purpose of today's stream is to talk about capitalism. Chat is not showing up on stream, apparently. Or is it? Tell me if chat's showing up on stream. It's supposed to be there so people can ask questions. Please feel free to ask any questions at any time. But, oh, it is brilliant. Oh yeah, because it's fading out. It's fine. Hydration check. I specifically told it to fade the messages out. I just thought that the messages that I could see in my dashboard were more recent. Anyway, the kind of backstory of this stream. About 2.5 years ago, I was at an academic conference, as I sometimes am, at one of the last places in the UK where the stereotype of academia as a hotbed of leftism is even faintly true. If anybody tells you that academia is a hotbed of leftism, you should stop listening to that person because they are trying to sell you something you should not buy. But there are still a few places where the culture hangs on, and I was at one of these at this conference, and I was on a discussion panel that was one of the centerpieces of the conference. Every so often Satisfactory has to autosave, and because this is a 250-hour file, the autosaves are pretty chunky. I was on this discussion panel, and basically the whole conference was assembled. So there's about maybe 100 people. And notionally the panel was about the right, was discussing kind of right-wing forms of political organisation over the years. This is my base camp, by the way. I've got a little recycling plant here. We're going to be picking up a lot of wooden leaves
It goes in here. Mushrooms go in here. This produces fabric. I also have... Not that one. Where is it? A lot of ammunition, because this forest is full of monsters. And we're going to make it not a forest. My trusty chainsaw. I'm just going to get started on that. So notionally, some of these trees don't die. The panel was about the right, but eventually discussion wound its way around to the left. What does it mean to say you're a leftist? What is it that all leftists have in common or agree on? Why do some of these trees not want to be cut down? And once upon a time, 100 leftist academics in a room discussing what the left is would have been just shy of a fight. Would have been a very, very lively discussion. Oh, we've got friends. It ended up being a bit of a damp squib, really. Nobody seemed to be able to... Oh my god, is there another one? There's another one. Nobody really seemed to be able to articulate a clear position that lots of people could get behind. And the closest thing was that people said, well, it's something to do with being anti-capitalist. Still not dead. Which, of course, you know, that's a fairly agreeable position. Being a leftist is something to do with being anti-capitalist. Where's my chainsaw gone? There it is. Hey, Jack. Thanks for stopping by. I found myself, when I was walking back from the conference, that's more hostiles. Whoa. Thinking about what it means to be anti-capitalist and realising I didn't really know. Like, I know capitalism is something to do with labour and something to do with money and something to do with exploitation. And I know that a lot of people that I respect and who know their way around theory think it's a bad thing. But I don't know if I could give you a definition. And so I started asking people as a curiosity point. You know, how would you define capitalism? Can you define capitalism? And what I found was that a lot of people seem to have similar trouble. So, in particular, a lot of people, rather than responding with a definition, would come out with a slogan of some sort. Broadly leftish people might say something like, well, capitalism is a system that knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. Is a fairly common quip. And I think that's on the money. You know, I don't think that's wrong. But it's not a definition. It doesn't tell you what capitalism is. It just tells you a thing that capitalism does. It doesn't tell you what it is for a system to know something. On the flip side, you get more kind of pro-capitalist people will say things like... oh, we got another friend. Where's my other friend? We'll say things like capitalism is a system that drives innovation or values innovation. We've got two friends. Or they might say capitalism is a system where everyone can survive if they work hard, or everyone can succeed if they work hard. I've been told both of those by students. There's another one. Yes. Hey, buddy. And those aren't necessarily entirely false things to say. We're going to cover how you end up with those views over the course of the next hour or two. But you know, none of that is a definition. None of that tells us what capitalism actually is. That's the joke, Ted. I'm doing a capitalism, and I'll talk a bit about capitalism and externalities towards the end, like why it is that capitalism not only produces but necessitates environmental devastation. But yeah, the stream title is Capitalism and Irony for a reason. That's a tree. Oh, that's a tree I can cut down. Find more trees. For some reason, this particular tree model can no longer be cut down in Satisfactory. And it means I can't actually clear cut the way I want to. Anyway, I was asking around, and I talked about it with Ted. Teo in chat, long-time academic friend, and non-academic friend, but somebody who I respect immensely, regard as very knowledgeable. And Ted suggested I read a book called The Origin of Capitalism, A Longer View. Actually, I have to take a bit of a step back. I was talking about this with Ted. Try not to get poisoned by the poison. There's Gribblies over there as well, be careful. And I was talking about things that I thought were parts of capitalism, and Ted said that I was talking about stuff that was all too old. I thought, what? Yeah, capitalism is like a modern thing. Modern in the sense of the modern period. Which, roughly speaking, starts in about the 17th century. Very contested definition, but that'll do for our purposes. I'm going to deal with you. Wrong button. There we go. Success. What? But because a lot of the kind of defenders of capitalism will talk about capitalism as if it's, you know, they'll cite examples from kind of the Roman era, even kind of ancient Greece. And so Ted suggested I read this history book, The Origin of Capitalism by Ellen Meikson's Wood, which is a great book. It's very readable by the standards of academic books. It is an academic book. We are going to get to the difference between capitalism and mercantilism. That's a key part of this story. Don't worry, we'll get there. The problem, if there's a problem with Wood's book, is that it's an academic book, and it starts with about 3 chapters of academic inside baseball. Which can be a little bit of a drag if you're not used to reading that sort of thing. So the goal today is basically to give you Wood's story with some embellishments, some stuff I've worked out for myself from other contexts. Yeah, hopefully kind of... I found it really, really useful in terms of like how I understand the world, how I understand what I'm doing in the world, and what I'm trying to achieve with my life, to learn this stuff, and I hope I can pass some of that on. So, we're talking economics, fundamentally, when we're talking about capitalism. And we're talking about economic systems and a history of economic systems. And an economic system is just a system that determines the conditions under which goods are exchanged. One could say it's a... we talk about economic systems typically in terms of how their markets work, where the market is the price-setting mechanism. I want to be a little bit careful about that because we're going to start with feudalism, and feudalism is conventionally understood as a system of null markets or no market, or of what Ellen Meikson's Wood calls... Oh, I'm being poisoned. Apologies for the very long chainsaw sound. That was the autosave. Ellen Meikson's Wood calls this closed market because it suits how her story works to keep the focus on markets all the way through. Let's But we're going to look at 3 economic systems. One other thing I should note, Wood is indebted to Robert Brenner, who's a Marxist historian from the mid-20th century, very, very influential historian, mostly of agriculture and of the agricultural revolution in England. Hydration check. This is going to be a very Eurocentric history. I'm talking about a combination of things happening, by chance happening at the same time, or almost by chance happening at the same time, that add up to produce capitalism here, where in other contexts the combinations of different things happen at slightly different times and the effects aren't the same. So this is not to say that anything I'm about to talk about happened first in Europe. Much of it happened much earlier elsewhere. But the combination is distinctive, and it gives us capitalism. And particularly because of the debt to Brenner, it gives us capitalism starting in the southeast of England, around London, in about the first half of the 17th century. One of the things I like about this history is that it is very, very specific about where capitalism starts and why. Whoops, you're poisonous, and I don't want to have to blow you up. And so, yeah, to get there, we have to go through some other stuff. Hey, Sophie, welcome. You have not missed too much. I'm kind of still in my introduction, 20 minutes into the stream, which is about right for a lengthy academic lecture. The overall structure here is we're going to talk about 3 economic systems. We're going to start with feudalism. You've probably heard of feudalism. We're going to talk about what feudalism is and how it works economically and politically. Obviously, the politics are inseparable from the... Where do you got an inventory space? I should go and empty my inventory. This is recycling, folks. Green capitalism means you turn the trees into something after you cut them down. Hey Jet, thanks for stopping by. Welcome to the stream. This is mushrooms. And I have all these leaves, all these flower petals that I can't use for anything because they don't really matter for anything in the game anymore. Feudalism, then mercantilism, and finally arriving at capitalism when we hit like I say, the 17th century. So, feudalism is the economic system of the Middle Ages, particularly of Christendom in the Middle Ages. We're going to be talking about the Christian version of feudalism, the European version of feudalism. It's a system that comes about sometime after the kind of dissolution of the Roman Empire, and holds sway through to somewhere in the 15th-ish century as the dominant economic paradigm. And the easiest way to explain what feudalism is, in terms that are understandable today, is that in feudalism, your landlord is also your boss. Right? There is one guy, and he's got all the power over you that your contemporary landlord has, and all the power over you that your contemporary employer has, and more besides, because he's also the local judge and chief of police. He's also the commander of the military unit that you or your closest male relative can be called up to serve in. And it's worse than that, because the way feudalism works, if you're a feudal peasant, you are legally bound to a patch of land, right? You have a tenancy, which is your relationship to a specific patch of land. It's a legal relationship. It's not really like an ancestral relationship that you might hear discussed in some indigenous cultures. But you are bonded to this piece of land, and that land is owned by the lord, and you can't leave the land. If you let's say your son takes a liking to the daughter of somebody in the next valley over, you would need the formal permission of your lord for them to marry. You would need the formal permission of your lord to visit them if they moved to the next manor, to the next lord's domain. This is manor, M-A-N-O-R, by the way, if that's not clear. So it's cognate with domain. By the way, stop me if I'm going too fast. I was super nervous just warming up for this stream, and it might be making me race. If I'm going too quickly, you want me to explain anything again, please say. That's not the other thing is that because your bond is to the land strictly and not to your lord, and it's the lord's relationship is to the land. If the lord loses the land, if I say that quickly, to some neighbouring lord, and they were constantly fighting over the boundary of their territories, you go with the land. So you might have a good relationship with your lord, but he loses a fight with his neighbour, and his neighbour gets control over your land and thus control over you. Quick digression here. This leads some people to say that the feudal peasants were slaves, in that they were effectively traded by their lords. I want to dispute that characterization, not on material grounds, right? The treatment that the feudal peasants. Yeah, that's not even my favourite linguistic connection, Carly. Coming up, when I talk about the word feud itself, there's a thing that I really enjoyed with that, but we'll get to that. Lots of these bits of language come out of feudalism and are still with us today. But yeah, the slavery point. I think there's a fundamental kind of ideological or rhetorical difference that's really important here, because as we are telling the history of European economics, we are going to be talking about... Hey doll, thanks for joining us. You're not wrong. Where should I go to get more trees? I think I probably need to go around the other side of the lake. Yeah, Villa and Villain as well. Hydration check. Train of thought pause. The slavery thing. I need to get this right. There is a difference, and it reflects a lot on how the kind of capitalist colonialist system of race develops, and it's going to be very important for us to get that right. And the difference is that the feudal peasant was fundamentally a Christian subject. The lords and the church are part of the same system of social meaning, part of the same system of social control, and the feudal peasant's bondage to the land is guaranteed by their Christian faith. And the obedience of the peasant to the lord is seen as analogous to their submission to God, in that it will guarantee their ultimate salvation. They're viewed as capable of being saved, as capable of going to heaven, so there is a fundamental humanity that is attributed to them in virtue of their participation in the feudal system. That's distinguished from the slaves. It's also distinguished in another important way from the position of Jews in medieval Europe. The reason for much of medieval anti-Semitism is that the Jews were understood by their lords, by the powers of the time, as not controlled by Christianity. And as a result, lots of the kind of medieval anti-Semitic ideas around kind of stigmatizing Jews as untrustworthy, for example, are derived from this fact that they couldn't be bound into a tenancy because they weren't Christian. Something similar, although less in a religious way, goes for the treatment of Gypsy, Roma and Traveller folks in Europe, who obviously may or may not have been Christian, but were not bonded to a particular patch of land. And so there's a role there for things that become racism when we get to the modern era and we get to things like slavery. And obviously the distinction between the feudal peasant and the slave is that the slave or the enslaved person could never become a Christian subject, even if they Christianized. Right? Enslaved people frequently did Christianize piecemeal or en masse, but it was never enough to secure them political rights. So there is that distinction. It's worth keeping that in mind. Is any of that cuttable? No. As we go on, because that racial backbone that is already starting to develop in this period, in the treatment of Jews in Europe, is going to become... Oh, that's poison. Is going to become an absolute spine for this whole system. I'm not going to talk much more about the racism stuff, but I want to flag it up early. So that's feudalism from like the point of view of the peasant, what we would experience if we lived under feudalism, and it sucks. It's a bad system. Peasants do not have a lot of power, and they are often very severely mistreated. But the actual term feudalism is as much a political as an economic term, and it derives from feudal, from feud. Now, I said there was a fun trick with the word feud. The feudal system is the system of the bond between a king and his lords, right? So the king controls some patch of land in virtue of... Ooh, that's a gribble. Let's deal with the gribble. There we go. Yee! So the king controls this land, but he controls it by raising armies from the barons that pay him homage, that are in fealty to him. The problem with that is that if enough of the barons rebel, his only way of controlling the barons is sending other barons after them. If enough of the barons rebel, then he doesn't get to have control anymore. And baronial revolts are a huge part of the feudal period, huge part of the warmongering that goes on in this period. It's endless warmongering. Whoops, that's the wrong button. There we go. And the word feud. let's not conflate baronial combinations with unionizing. That happens too much as it is, right? If you ever hear someone say something like the Magna Carta is the foundational document of English liberalism, or of the English liberal tradition, this is a person that you should regard with some suspicion, because it is a document of baronial power against the king. It is basically a my barons have unionized joke, and anyone who's not treating it as a joke is selling you something you shouldn't buy. The relationship between the king and the barons, the king and a baron, is called a feud. Fealty comes from the same root. And the reason that the word feud in modern English means a fight or a grudge or a disagreement is because the feuds of feudalism were so fraught with disagreement. Hello, friends. Oops, Daisy. Ow. I need to reload. No, I don't need to do finger guns. Why am I not reloading? Oh, I'm out of ammo. Holy shit. That's not good. Where's my backup ammo stores? I point out that lots of classic Russian literature... Yeah, I mean, lots of classic literature, but I think it's maybe especially Russian literature does connect to feudalism because of the periods it comes from. There's a huge interest in the feudal period, right? We still tell lots of stories about kind of medieval peasants and stuff. I should unload while I'm here. My storage is already almost full. This is horrifying. Isn't it nice to see all this beautifully cleared ground that we can do capitalism on? So the end of that thought was that the reason that we now have the word feud as a fight is that the medieval feuds were so fraught with strife and with war making that the meaning of the term completely flipped. This is why I am obsessed always with etymology, because you find the wildest stuff sometimes. So feudal system really is a matter of the king fighting with the lords, and the debts between the lords. We are now finally in a position to talk about the economics of feudalism with all those pieces on the table. So the thing that really defines feudalism economically is that most of the economic productivity of a feudal manor was directly consumed. It was not traded or exchanged. Here's the friends again. Crazy. There's one more somewhere. Where are you? Over there. Safe. So you live on a patch of land, and on that land you grow food, right? And most of that food is going to be the food you need to survive. And then some of that food you pay in tithes to your lord, to the church. The lord pays some of the money, some of the produce that he gets in tithe to the church, or maybe the church tithes to him. Depends a bit on the balance of power when you get to that stage. But the lord tithes to the king, church, etc. A lot of tithing, a lot of tax. There is very little trade, there's very little exchange of goods, and especially there is not exchange of goods between manors as a major component of economic activity. There is some, so for example, not every manor has its own iron mine. Some manors need to buy in iron to maintain their tools. But the actual trade that takes place is very limited, and it's a tiny portion of the overall quantity of economic activity. So this is why feudalism is described as a non-market or a null market economy, because this trade is not happening and it's not economically important on the grand scale of things. It's vital for the manors continuing to function, but it's very proportionally very small. And so the golden rule, if we're talking about feudalism, this business of closed markets, goods not being produced for exchange, but only for consumption and tithing for downstream consumption. So that's feudalism. 40 minutes in, we're done with stage one. That's about on schedule, actually. The next stage is mercantilism. And this is one of those points where your boss rents the land you're bound to from their bigger landlord. Yeah, basically, it's very, very strictly hierarchical. I've been talking as if there's one layer of barons and then the king. In reality, there would be 2, sometimes 3 or 4 layers of barons between the peasant and the king. Sometimes even more than that. It's a very complex system. We don't need to know about the details. But here is one of those points where lots of things happen in about the same time and place. somewhere in Europe that have happened at different times and places elsewhere, and have resulted in different combinations elsewhere. This is the North Mediterranean in the 15th century. This is places like Venice and Genoa and Amalfi, and there's one I always forget, that become what we call city-states. We don't really have nation-states at this point yet. We have kingdoms. Kingdoms are not nation-states. It's important not to interpret them as nation-states. But we don't have nation-states. And I'll talk about what the nation-state is as it starts to emerge. But we do start to get city-states. We start to get city-states because economic conditions start to favour cities. The reason for that is that there are three groups of technical advance, technological advance that occur at about the same time in the same place. One is to do with shipbuilding. One group of new advancements is to do with shipbuilding. One is to do with navigation, and one is to do with bureaucracy. And as far as I'm aware, all of these were discovered elsewhere first. For example, the Pacific Islanders clearly had navigation technologies far in advance of anything that Europe had thousands of years earlier. Maybe tens of thousands of years earlier, because they were sailing across the Pacific, navigating very confidently and competently. Whereas Europe could barely manage the Mediterranean. But in order to manage the Mediterranean, new technologies developed. It's the bureaucratic technologies that I think are the most kind of distinctive and least obvious. Oh, hello, friend. Ow. That hurt it. Ow! This could be bad. Load. Whoa. There we go. Safe. I need to heal up. So what happens is not just that the ships get better and that they're able to travel further, but that the people who own the ships, the investors who fund their construction, are better able to keep track of what they're doing. And so they start to manage what we might call merchant empires. That's a slightly metaphorical use of empire relative to things we're going to talk about later on, but it works well enough. And it's a change in how merchantry operates and how the business of buying and selling goods operates. Because now you have a big ship and you can send it somewhere and buy up a bunch of stuff that is cheap there and transport all that stuff to somewhere where it's expensive and sell it for a profit. And you can do this over much longer distances, and you can keep track of how it is being done, so that you can tell which trades are efficient and effective, where you're getting a good price, where you're getting a bad price, and kind of... I mean, that kind of game is entirely based on, like, a mythologized version of this period. What's really going on here is the invention of buying cheap and selling dear as an economic model, right? We associate this with capitalism. It actually kind of predates capitalism. Like, capitalism is going to be something else. But you have these merchants who are making their huge new profits in this way. So what we say is that this has this is capitalism. Sorry, this is mercantilism. It is separate but connected markets, because the thing you need for this to work is you need two different markets that set different prices on the same commodity. You need somewhere where the price is low that you can buy at, and somewhere where the price is high that you can sell at. So you want the markets to be separate. You want them to be setting different prices, but you want them to be connected in that you want to be connecting them. The person who gets to be the connection between them, There's a Gribbly. I can hear a Gribbly. And he's grumpy with me. Where is he? But you want to be the connection between the markets, because that's where the profit is. I'm going to get charged. Oh, it's a spider! Spiders, we don't fight with the gun, because they move too fast. Spiders, we fight like men with swords. Sorry, not swords, xenobashers. Hello, friend. Apologies if you don't like spiders. I promise I'll make quick work of this. Get back here. Ow. Why is it green? Stop that. This is not going well. Bye. There we go. I know you like spiders, doll. We've been over this many times. Your feelings are valid. Although not val-ish. I was talking about buying cheap and selling dear. And yeah, so feudalism, closed markets. That is the next point. Thank you for asking, Sarah. That's exactly where I'm going next. But quickly to kind of close that point out. Feudalism, closed markets. That's another fucking large charger. That's going to be really annoying. Where are you? Oh, there you are. Uh-oh. Ow. Yeah. Closed markets, feudalism, separate but connected markets, mercantilism. Oh, you play with the cat filter on. I love the cat filter, but I also like the spiders, so they stay as spiders for me. The advent of the kind of merchant prince causes a huge number of changes. I think I have 3 broad things I want to talk about. I'm not sure I could list them off the top of my head. By the way, I'm doing this completely without notes. If I was doing this in class, I would have notes. But I'm trying to do it all from memory while also playing the video game. Stop crackling it. What do you need? Needs a quantum computer to open. Okay, we won't be opening that anytime soon. So, the first thing, right, the feudal lord has to live, or has to maintain a presence on his land, because he's got to stay there enough time so that the peasants don't get rowdy. So if the feudal lord is away from the land for too long, the peasants rise up. And this is a fairly frequent feature of the feudal period, almost as common as baronial revolts against the king. But the feudal lord has to live out on the land. The merchants don't, right? Because while many of them own land, many of them are minor aristocracy. They aren't making most of their power from their control over the land. I'm going to have to go and drop stuff off again. Where the hell's my base camp? I've gone too far. Oh, there it is. Oops. So the merchants congregate in ports, in cities, where they can manage their ships as much as it's possible to keep an eye on their ships. Where is the mushrooms? There's the mushrooms. Are these emptying at all? They're emptying a bit. This is probably full. Yep, let's build another one then. That way around. There we go. Grab some more ammo while I'm here. So the merchants congregate in cities. And so cities start to become more and more politically important. And that's going to be a pattern that continues. So that's one thing that happens. Another thing that happens is that so taxation systems of this time are fundamentally kind of measured, like feudal taxation systems are fundamentally based on land area, land value, because productivity under feudalism is very, very strongly connected to amount of land owned. The more land you own, the richer you are. That breaks down under mercantilism because the merchants aren't making most of their money from land. So the kingdoms and princedoms and so on that want to tax mercantile economic activity have to learn the same forms of kind of bureaucratic tracking. I don't think I said this earlier. This is basically kind of the beginnings of the invention of modern accountancy. The princes have to become accountants or develop their own systems of tax accountancy. So we're starting to see the emergence of a new kind of bureaucracy. It's very interested in the balance of trades, in customs and excise, and therefore in border control, right? Previously, the boundaries of territory were contested in war, but there was not a huge amount of direct control over goods crossing them. And you wouldn't see, like, borders being manned and like, checkpoints and things. This is where you start to get that bureaucracy, those kinds of systems appearing. And they appear simply because the kings want to be able to keep track of the balance of trade and tax it appropriately. Did I just see something moving? Maybe it was a bird. So this is the first step on the way to the development of the nation state. The other big thing that happens, of course, is the start of colonialism, the first phase or first form of colonialism. Because it turns out that if your business model is finding somewhere to buy something cheaply, buying a lot of it, and then shipping it to somewhere you can sell it more expensively, the easiest way to get a cheap sell price is to take a bunch of guns to a place, point them at the locals, and say, hey, sell to me at the price I want to buy at. And so this is Columbus in 1492. Columbus is Italian, goes to the Spanish court. He goes to the various Italian people first, and they laugh him off. But he goes to the Spanish court, and he kind of picks his moment because it is the exact year that the Christian Spanish crown completes its defeat of the Muslim caliphates of the Iberian Peninsula, and so Columbus's voyage is commissioned by Ferdinand and Isabella, partly kind of in celebration of, or kind of notionally in celebration of their victory. And, off he toddles to the Caribbean, points his guns at a bunch of people, says, sell to me at the price I want to buy at, and he starts making Spain very rich. Although Columbus's ventures were never as successful as the later ventures of Cortez and Pizarro, who went to the South and Central American mainland, where they found enormous silver mines. And what those silver mines allow Spain to do is fund huge war making throughout Europe in the 16th century. Let me collect my thoughts again. Europe in the 16th century becomes very politically turbulent. It was already politically turbulent, but turbulent on a new scale because Spain is trying to conquer the whole continent, and various powers are resisting. Was he Polish? I know he came to Spain from Italy. My apologies if I've missed a biographical detail there. But the thing that's at the end of this sentence. I guess the big thing that happens here, right, is there's all this war making on the European mainland, and that puts London, the city of London in the southeast of England, in a weirdly advantageous position, because it's a major port, a huge port, a hugely important port, a very wealthy port, that is very, very close to a lot of war, but that is protected from it by 25 miles of sea. Now, there are attempts to attack London. The most famous of these is the Spanish Armada. Famously, the Spanish Armada fails. It's much more a case of it failing than being defeated. It's mostly the weather wrecks the fleet, and then the English Navy mops up the remainder. But what this means is that London grows, and it grows very, very quickly to an unprecedented size, and becomes the largest city in Europe. It's still the largest city in Europe by a wide margin. I meant to look at the numbers, and I forgot. I forgot multiple times. But I think it is something like half again as large as the next largest city in Europe. Which is devastating for modern Britain. Something like a third of all economic activity in Britain supports the London kind of business sector. If you want to know why our national press is so unhinged, it's because they're all within that bubble of that kind of economic bubble at the core of London. But London grows, and obviously cities... Hang on. I have skipped a step. I apologise. Another thing that happens under Mercantilism is that the feudal lords who own the land start to have an interest in selling stuff, right? When a merchant shows up, they want to be able to sell to the merchant, because that gives them a taste of mercantile wealth, and it gives them a chance to get onto the mercantile system. So there begins to be a pressure on the feudal lords to shift from this feudal closed market production mainly for consumption model towards production for exchange. That's going to be an important foundation for capitalism, where exchange really takes over from consumption as the main driver of production. But we'll get there. One of the things that conversion in farming does, is it means that old relationships of farming... I've completely lost my bearings. Where are we? I want to go this way. Old relationships of the feudal peasants to the land get disrupted because the farming methods change. Am I going in the right direction? I'm going in the right direction. Oh, this bit of land is full of poison plants. I should not be here. And so peasants start getting displaced from their hereditary relationships to their land, and they go to the cities as well, because it's the only place they can go. Mushrooms. Need to build another one of these. And so the cities obviously need to feed themselves. A city, almost definitionally, is a place that can't grow its own food because the people are living too closely together. Why should you look? Where's my... There it is. There we go. And so the cities, and especially London, are buying in more and more food. Now, this means that the proletarian people, the working class people who are living in cities, are buying their food rather than growing it, so they care about the price of food. It also means that more and more of the grain that is being produced overall. So if you're an urban poor person, an urban working class person in this kind of 16th century period, you're buying bread, right? Is your main foodstuff probably, and vegetables. Those are being bought into London by a merchant, by a grain factor, typically. The grain factors, as they have to buy more and more of the grain that's available to manage to keep up with demand, gain control of the buy price because they become the market, right? Everybody else who is buying and selling grain has to compete with them. And so the price gets fixed for grain across the whole of the southeast of England, a region that we sometimes still call the breadbasket of London. It's very fertile farmland, a lot of sustenance farming there. That grain is now all either being sold to London or being sold at the London price. And so we've got two important things here. One is this business of working class people's access to the means of survival now being on a market, now being something they're paying a price for. And the other is the way that the London market starts to affect other things. Because once you control the price of grain, you control the value of land. Because the value of land just is the value of the grain that can be grown on it. Or whatever other market commodity it can support. There's a big push known as enclosure that accelerates around this time of shifting the land from grain farming to produce food to sheep farming to produce wool, because wool is the more expensive commodity and so it's more profitable. So in Ellen Meikston's Wood's version of the history of capitalism, which is what I'm largely relying on here, the archetypal movement of capitalism is what she calls market consolidation. Under mercantilism, if you're a merchant, you want the markets that you're trading in to be as separate as possible. You want there to be as little, if you buy cheap in one place and sell dear in another, you want the low price to have as little effect on the high price as possible. They're always going to converge over time because you're changing the supply. You're buying stuff, making it scarcer, and selling stuff and making it more common. So the prices are going to converge, but you want that to happen slowly because your profit is the difference between the prices. What happens with this business of the London grain market is that it consolidates all prices onto the same market. And so it's tying all these prices together, which is now a very familiar phenomenon, right? One price shifts and lots of other prices have to shift with it. There are some knock-on effects. So one of them is that enclosure accelerates, right? There's increasing conversion to profit farming, which displaces more peasants, which accelerates urbanization. Another is that as the commodity prices get fixed by this process of consolidation, the only way to increase your profit becomes to squeeze production, becomes to reduce the cost of production so that selling at the same price nets you more profit. So this is like the classic Marxist account of capitalism, right? It's a system of control over the means of production being used to constantly squeeze labor. And to make labor more precarious, to make labor cheaper, to make it, fundamentally, to make it harder for laborers to make a living. I should not be here. Where else have I cut? Where should I go? I'm a bit worried I'm going to have to go over this big ledge that's just ahead of me here. And that's going to make it very difficult to get back to base camp. But the big thing with the consolidated market that I want to focus on, and here I'm going a little bit beyond Wood to bring things more up to the present day. Her book was originally published in '99. It got a new edition, which is the one I read, in 2017, but it doesn't really do much kind of late 20th century stuff. I don't want to go down there if I can avoid it. Let's go over this way. Ouch. Because I want to talk about like the capitalism that we're doing right now here on Twitch in the year 2022. And like I have some examples that are literally things that happened yesterday to get to. Remind me about those if I forget at the end. I'm going to talk about Bandcamp. I'm going to talk about Twitch analytics. But the thing I really want to focus on is the way that market consolidation progresses. Because once a market has been consolidated, it is very difficult to enter, right? A consolidated market is one where the market power is very entrenched. So this puts the lie to that thing earlier about capitalism is a system where anyone can succeed if they work hard enough. The way to succeed in capitalism is to consolidate some new commodity into the market. So obviously, like the London grain merchants get off the starting blocks first, and they consolidate all the grain market and various things that are contingent on the grain market, like the price of land and stuff. Oh boy, there's a big dribble. These guys are an arse to fight. Give me a moment here. Catch my breath. Okay, what was he protecting? Is that anything good? That's more friggin' bauxite. That's the last thing I need. More aluminium. Never want to see aluminium in this fucking game ever again. 40 hours that factory took me to build. Me and Lexi. Fair play, she helped a lot. Yeah, so a consolidated market is a difficult market to enter. And the way to get rich in a system of market consolidation is to be the leading edge of consolidation. Right? It's to bring some new thing to the market. The first phase of this is geographical. So this is the second stage of colonialism. In the mercantile form of colonialism, merchants go places and they point guns at people and they say, you know, give me your stuff, and they transport that stuff to Europe to sell it. In the capitalist phase of colonialism, what happens is that the capitalists go to these places and they set up shop, because what they need to do is not just point a gun at someone and say, give me your stuff. They need to get people who are living in India, in parts of Africa, in parts of the Americas, to do their economic activity on the market. So this is where you get things like the British and Dutch East India companies, which are kind of almost states in their own right. You know, they set up huge urban spaces, city-like spaces, fortresses and so on, particularly in India. What they are doing there is not just brutalizing people and stealing their stuff, but is forcing the people who live there to connect their economic sufficiency to the London market, the expanding capitalist market, the market of the British Empire. Because that is the way to make yourself rich under capitalism, is to control something that you can bring to market. As that starts to slow down, then you see the emergence of maybe the pattern that defines both the early modern period, like the emergence of slavery, and like late modernity after slavery, which is that in order to get rich, you have to bring some new commodity to market. Right? The geographic phase of expansion brings new territories into the market, but eventually you run out of territories, or it becomes too expensive to bring new territories into the market. So you start bringing new commodities to market. And the first place this goes, basically, is new ways of commoditizing labor, especially slavery. So the modern form of slavery, chattel slavery, livestock slavery. Yeah, I mean, crypto is a perfect example. I was going to talk about crypto a bit later, but crypto is absolutely people trying to invent a new market that they can then profit from the consolidation of, which is going just great. If you happened to get a bunch of Bitcoin in like, I'm full up again. Let's go back. Holy shit, I have traveled a bit. That's good. If you happen to get like a bunch of Bitcoin in like 2003 or whenever, you are now part of the market consolidation and you're cashing out for lots of money. But that's dependent on you folding other people into the same market. Crypto, perfect example. There are other perfect examples that I'm also going to talk about. But first, slavery, the conversion of human beings into a commodity. Obviously, like there's a huge racial logic that has to be imported to make that work. That has to be kind of set up to make that work. But that's fundamentally what's going on. Of course, crypto has that weird relationship with cashing out. Yeah. I haven't talked as much as I was maybe thinking of doing about the state so far. The state kind of, the first phase of the state is this business under mercantilism of like controlling balance of trade and like customs and excise and stuff. As we get to slavery, as we get to human capital, controlling the movement of people becomes really important, and you get the emergence of the border, right? And the border regime, which is the defining feature of the modern state, is that it violently polices its own borders and it controls who enters, and it makes your political entitlements contingent on the circumstances of your birth. That's the modern state. And it is very modern, like it's a last 400 years thing. Don't let anybody tell you that border control is a classical phenomenon or has been around since the birth of civilization or anything. Again, those are people who are selling you something you shouldn't buy. So much poison plant. Get my brain back in order. Anyway, slaves are human capital, and the people who bring slavery to the market get very rich. Slavery is an interesting one because eventually the value of slave capital is pretty much directly superseded by industrial capital of various forms. The downfall of slavery isn't, a lot is owed to abolitionists, but the reason that slavery collapses, ultimately, is that its defenders start losing economically, and they lose the power of ideological control that they previously had in virtue of their wealth. Like the reason that the South loses the American Civil War, which is kind of the death knell of slavery. Is that the bit that's full of poison plants? Is because they are economically outcompeted by the North, where the economy is more industrialized. Industrialization is just the start of mass production and of kind of consumer capitalism, of the bringing of consumer goods to the market economy. I'm kind of whizzing through this because I don't know as much about the period between the 17th and 20th centuries as I do either side of it. So there's all sorts of wrinkles to industrialization that somebody more knowledgeable than me could talk about. I'm going to pick up the story again in the 20th century with what we might call consumer capitalism. The kind of iconic moment here is the kind of new suburban working class housewife buying a washing machine. Because the last card I want to put into play here is that a lot of the capitalist creation of let's play cricket a second, baseball I guess. Oh god, oh no, this is a bad combination. I should get away from here. I don't want to fight the bees and the charger. One of the ways that... Sorry, the main way in our era that capitalism commodifies new things is by taking existing forms of human activity and sliding a market layer in underneath them. So a working class housewife was always going to be doing the laundry, right? That's a basic, fundamental economic function, and a fundamental form of domestic labour. What happens when someone sells her household a washing machine is that activity is now on the market because it is subject to the market price of washing machines. And that's the pattern that's going to define... That one pattern that's going to define the late 20th century. The other, of course, is the crypto pattern of making up an asset and convincing someone else to buy it. So after consumer capitalism tops out, kind of 50s, 60s, 70s, you get financial capitalism emerges in the late 70s and kind of rises to dominance in the 80s. This is Thatcherism and Reaganism. And that really is just making stuff up and bringing it to market. That really is like the perfect example of this is doesn't really come until the credit crunch, where you get bankers making a bunch of loans that they know are bad, selling the debt from those loans to other bankers, making bets on the debt that they have sold that it will fail, and then selling the debts to one another as well. What we call derivatives trading. It's tempting to say it's funny money. What it really is the PC revolution. What do you mean by PC revolution? Off the top of my head, I'm unfamiliar with this term. But yeah, financial capitalism. So the next phase I was going to talk about is what I'm going to call, and I don't like this name for it, but I haven't thought of a better one. I'm going to call digitization. Like, the market phases or phases of capitalism always overlap, right? And financial capitalism comes to dominance in the 80s, and then digital capitalism emerges in the 90s, really. Like, obviously, digitization, computation exists well before that, but it gets into the households in a large scale in the 90s, and then particularly over the last 20 years rises to dominance. What's really happening there is the new form of capitalism is being born while the old one is at its peak, which is not unusual. Like, I also want to avoid the impression that I'm saying that this is a cycle that's sped up. Like, we're talking about finer grained detail than we have been thus far. Like, mercantilism to colonial capitalism to industrial capitalism. Those are very broad strokes, and if you were an expert on the period, you would be able to make distinctions like consumer, financial, digital that we're making here. I'm only making these distinctions because I know enough about the period that I'm talking about to point them out. So yeah, like, financial capitalism booms, has several busts. There are busts, major busts at the end of the 80s in the West, at the start of the 90s in East Asia, especially Japan, which gives us the lost decade. And usually on the tail of those busts comes a stage of digitization in one way or another. So in the 90s you get the dot-com boom, for example, which follows on from the 80s busts. And the dot-com boom famously was another example of inventing a commodity, convincing someone to invest in it, and then the bottom drops out when they realize it's worthless. You get lots of companies, I once heard it described as inventing solutions for problems that don't exist. There's a gribble around here somewhere. Oh, and loads of bees. I don't want to fight gribbles and bees. That would go poorly. Where are there trees to cut? This is going to be swarming with gribbles. Can't cut those down. Let's go this way. Also gribble here.
Relaying message. Hello, this is the turtle figure. I have taken ill and need your help to find a cure. Doctors say that the only remedy is alien artifacts.
That's Ada telling me to pick up this cool S, which I'm not going to do, because I've been annoying her all game by ignoring them. I'm about to change that now. But the perfect example here of all of these is really social media, right? Because it's the insertion of a market layer in that you were already talking to your friends. You were even probably already talking to your friends on the internet. So you were meeting people elsewhere around the world and stuff. But suddenly you're doing it on Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp or Twitter, God forbid. You might end up talking to people like me if you hang out on Twitter. And that market layer has been inserted under your pre-existing activity to commodify it, to bring it into the market, to consolidate it. And people have gotten very rich by being early to that market. Not everybody who's early to the market gets rich, but lots of people do. Minecraft Tom, MySpace Tom, Minecraft Tom. I guess, in a way, Notch is part of this story. Minecraft does do this, sort of. And you can fit Minecraft into a social media analysis if you want to. Zuckerberg is a big one. Bezos is another big one. This is why the internet is just 4 companies now. But also, like, the business of inventing a commodity is important here, right? Because the market value of you doing your communication with your friends on Twitter or on Discord or whatever isn't that you are paying for that service. You might pay for some of those services to some degree or other. What's really going on is you are making a number go up, which Zuckerberg or Jack Dorsey or whoever can point to and say, hey, we made this number really big. And then they can take the number to an investor and say, hey, look at our big number. Give us some money, please. So I've called this digital capital. I think the broader movement here is towards reputational capital. So much more of this is about the way you are able to package your numbers so that people will just give you money. A nice illustration of this, although it doesn't necessarily directly relate to social media, there's a situation with Apple. So for a while, I think in the noughties, Apple was based in Ireland. They're based in Ireland because they managed to strike favourable tax deals with the Irish government, and they got very, very rich in that context. And they have a huge amount of money in Irish bank accounts. And then the credit crunch hit, Ireland changed its tax conditions, and Apple moved away. They did the thing that capitalist businesses threaten to do a lot, which is they said, well, if you're going to tax us, we're not going to do business here, we'll move somewhere else. But they can't move the money that they have in those Irish bank accounts because it will be taxed. I forget the number. It is either 25 billion or 250 billion. It's a huge amount of money either way. That is just sitting inert in Irish bank accounts, belonging to Apple, but unmoved. Which is very bad. Stagnant money is bad for us, right? It's great for the big companies, it's terrible for us. We want money to be moving around. I'm full up again. Do I have any idea where I need to go back to my factory? Yes, over there. God bless the draw distance. Oops. But, fortunately for Apple, they don't actually need to spend that money. What they can do if they want to do a big money project is they can go to a bank and they can say, hey, we've got $25 billion in these Irish bank accounts. We don't want to touch it, but we do want to build, a new $250 million headquarters. Can we have $250 million that is secured against our $25 billion in Ireland that we don't want to touch? And the bank will say, yes, fantastic. You're Apple. We know you. We know you're a trustworthy brand, a trustworthy company. You're a legible economic actor to us. Here's your money. You pay it back whenever. And so the fact that that money is immobilized, greatly to the detriment of the Irish people, and to be clear, I'm not blaming the Irish government for this. I'm blaming Apple for this. The problem is with Apple. The fact that that money is immobilized doesn't stop Apple doing business because they're trading on reputation, and they're trading on this kind of fantasy commodity that they have. So, where does that get us to? We have a consolidated market for reputation, basically. So now we can talk about Bandcamp, right? Because Bandcamp just got bought, which is to say they got consolidated into the market in a new way. It is worth stopping to think about what the commodity is that Tim Sweeney at Epic just bought when he picked up Bandcamp, because, on the face of it, Bandcamp is a music service, right? So you would think, oh, he's buying a way of commodifying music or a way of trading music. I don't think that's actually the truth. I don't think that's really what's going on. I think what's really going on is he's buying a certain kind of audience trust, or a certain kind of consumer trust. Bandcamp, we buy and we sell on Bandcamp, and I sell music on Bandcamp. It's Bandcamp Friday tomorrow. Please check out my music, link below. The stream I have a new song coming out soon, but it's not ready yet. I was hoping to have it ready. It's not ready because singing is hard. But we buy on Bandcamp because it is trustworthy in particular ways. In ways that, for example, Spotify isn't. You know, we know Spotify is bad for artists. Whoa. What a frame to freeze on. I did turn down the autosave frequency because the autosaves are getting so long. Ow. There we go. Better. And so what Tim Sweeney is doing is buying a brand that lets him trade trust in a new way. That's the new commodity that is that he's hoping to marketize and to consolidate. And of course it doesn't work like that because we don't trust Epic. But that's the idea behind that acquisition. The other thing I was going to talk about, the big thing that a lot of us were in kind of streamer communities were talking about yesterday, is Twitch metrics, right? And why our current viewer numbers lag, and it's very frustrating that they lag, and so on. Tim Sweeney just found out about music yesterday. Oh man, God knows what he thinks. I still get him confused with Tim Schafer. I mean, I would say the opposite, Doll. It is the love that cannot be seen. Capitalism wants to see things and it can't see the love itself. It has to see something else. Because the other thing that... right. Thank you, Doll. I will do my best to remember this 6 months from now when I get through a full episode of Echo. The last thing I really want to talk about is what Nick Cernicek has called platform capitalism. There are kind of two competing theories of how we should describe the contemporary form of capitalism. There's Cernicek's platform capitalism. What the fuck? That's a spider. Oh, that's a spider. Hello, friend. Do the thing, please. See, they're not too bad if you get them out in the open. It's only when they're doing that business in the middle of a thicket or in a cave that there's really a problem. Get back here. Ow. I didn't know they had a poison attack. That's new.
I strongly advise you
Shut
to
up,
harvest this
Ada.
specimen.
I've got a spider to kill. Ah! There we go. That was fun. So, yeah, two different models that I think I've seen in competition around it. One is platform capitalism, and the other is techno-feudalism, which I've mostly heard Yanis Varoufakis talk about. Why is there still poison here? I prefer the Cernicek version. And I'll be honest, I don't know that I feel competent to explain techno-feudalism. I think techno-feudalism is a possible future state. I don't think we currently live in techno-feudalism. I don't think the feudal control is well enough established for that. But platform capitalism is a system based primarily not on money, but on data. And on the ability to package data and trade it as a commodity. Which doesn't just like, we sometimes think that that primarily means like, oh, they're tracking your buying habits and they're showing you ads on that basis. That's an important part of it. But really, the data stuff is much more general than that. It's the ability to quantify you and package the quantification, right? Twitch does not care what I'm doing on my stream, generally, right? They care that they can show this number of viewer hours to some other industry business, right? To some advertiser, to some investor, whatever. They don't care who generates those viewer hours. They don't even really care about efficiency, as is clearly shown by the fact that they let me stream to 12 people for 2 hours without charging me anything. All they care about, because it's the only thing that matters, is how big the number is. How many hours were streamed, how many hours were watched. And so that is why you are never going to get accurate to the second viewership data from Twitch. There's another gribble. I can hear it. You can bet that they have that data. Most of the rumors about them like devaluing individual views, probably false, blown out of proportion. Twitch have denied a lot of it, and I actually believe them. Right. So the rumor recently was that Twitch was going to stop counting you as a viewer if you don't chat every 15 minutes. Twitch have categorically denied this. There's no evidence that they brought this in as a policy. It doesn't show up in any of the like macro numbers at all in ways that it very obviously would. They don't want to stop counting you as a viewer because it doesn't matter to them whether you're actually looking at the advert. It matters to them whether they can tell someone that you were looking at the advert. So good news, lurking is still on. But I had a couple of interesting discussions yesterday with people who wanted... yes, you got there slightly ahead of me, Carly, I think. But I had a couple of conversations yesterday with other streamers who were really kind of frustrated by the fact that Twitch won't provide us accurate information, aren't really interested in giving us accurate information. Because, you know, information about who's watching and who's lurking is useful to me as a content creator. That tells me what I can do. You know, what of the things I'm doing are working, what aren't. To a certain extent. I mean, it doesn't tell me a lot because there aren't enough data points. You know, when I have an average viewership of 4, I do not have a big enough data set to do... yeah, that's true. We all get different windows on this, right? I am good at talking about the theory here because I'm trained to talk in terms of theory. In some ways, I have less direct experience of capitalism than most of you watching, because I have never worked a full-time job in my adult life, because I've been in academia my entire adult life, and academia, for all its problems, is not the real world. But so I had a number of conversations with people who really wanted more kind of, oh god, friends. Where's my gun? Whee! Oh, I'm too close to the car. Ow! Yeah, this is bad Souls gaming. Please die. Please die. No! Fuck. Why do you have so much health? Oh, God. That's a little tight for comfort. Where are my berries? There we go. Conversations with the streamers where they were complaining about lack of metrics and metrics not giving them enough. Is that also an Umineko reference, doll? That sounds like it's also an Umineko reference. Oh, that one. Right. Yes. Well, that was a very special pig. There we go. The ones that stand still are easy to get. Where are we? Here we go. More trees! And I really want to encourage people to avoid thinking in those kind of purely quantified terms, because the numerical data isn't going to be very useful to you until you have thousands of data points to draw on. You know, I can look at the last, it's basically 15 months of streaming activity that I have racked up now, and I can see a slight positive trend across that. That's the sort of scale at which data becomes useful. Looking at the analytics for a single stream and seeing where people join and leave is only useful if you've got hundreds of viewers, maybe even thousands. And even then is really only useful if you can very precisely correlate that with what you're doing and do actual statistical analysis on it, which, you know, I don't know how to do that kind of statistical analysis at all. That's specialist shit. The things that really work if you want to know what's going on are qualitative analyses. And like, this stream is the result of qualitative analysis in the simple sense that I joked about doing it 3 or 4 months ago with a few people, and those few people were kind of, I would really like to watch that. So I eventually did the stream, and here we are. And it's easily my most successful stream of the year so far. Thank you all for being here. And I have a whole bunch of other thoughts about quantification and capitalism. In particular, this is really like how science comes to be our dominant understanding of what knowledge is, which is significantly owed to Newtonian physics and to the way that Newtonian physics' ability to see the world as a system of maths, a system of number. Serves capitalism. So Newton was working at the time that capitalism is starting to emerge, of course. That's lots of friends. I'm not going to fight them now. I don't need a purple energy slug right now. But that's thoughts for another time. Maybe for my 200 follower celebration stream, if I get there. I think I have told my story. I think that is The Origin of Capitalism, A Longer View by Ellen Meiksins-Wood, summarized in probably an hour and a half. It's obviously, it covers a huge swathe of history. Explains a lot of why everything is shit now, I hope. If I have a closing message, it is that while the specifics have changed a lot in terms of, you know, this move from like proto-capitalism, from mercantilism to proto-capitalism to agrarian capitalism to industrializing to slavery, industrialization, consumer capitalism, blah, 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 all that stuff, the underlying logic hasn't changed, right? And the ways that capitalism has been fought for the last 400 years still work, right? Strikes work, direct action works. So while it is very easy to be bleak, and I'm not saying that bleakness isn't justified, we have the tools to do something about it. The history of power, people with power, finding new ways to accumulate more power. I mean, capitalism... So this was kind of a mistake that I made at the start of this, when I was first encountering this question of, like, how do you define capitalism? I was conflating the history of capitalism and the history of power. Capitalism is a specific stage of the history of power. So you're not wrong, but also power is much broader. And I have a theory of power, which I'll talk about sometime. But that's it for capitalism. I'm happy to take questions if you have questions. You want me to follow up on anything? If I said I was going to talk about something and didn't. Or I can just like wander around the factory and show off stuff we built that you haven't already seen. I don't think I'm going to cut down any more trees because there's a few gribblies out there, and I'm scared. How are we doing? Do that. Again, thank you all very much for being here. I hope it was interesting and useful. As I say, I have found it much easier to understand what the fuck is going on since I learned all this stuff. And so how does all... Oh my goodness. So, here's a free 5-minute philosophy of everything Homestuck. We are not reading the honk. I still need to make the honk if you hate Andrew Hussey asset. I'm working on it. It's all made. I just need to figure out how to implement it. But here is a thought about Homestuck, right? Yeah, just knowing that it wasn't always like this makes a huge difference. To know that we live in a specific historical phase and that historical phases can change. That's the whole promise of like classical Marxism, right? Is that capitalism is a phase and it's doomed. And it is doomed, it's just a question of whether or not we're doomed. I said I was going to talk about environmental externalities. That's the thing I should talk about because that's the whole joke of this stream. I'll do that. But Homestuck first, since someone asked. Curse you. Where the frick the power shells are? Homestuck is the fantasy of a completely programmable universe. Of a universe where everything is directly answerable to computation. It's actually incredibly video games, right? Homestuck is the video game. It is the imagined video game to which, like, gamers, capital G gamers, think every game aspires. You know, the post Breath of the Wild, post Minecraft game where everything is perfectly interactable in every way. Let's climb down a very, very tall ladder. I'll try not to scare anybody with heights. I missed the jump. There we go. But Homestuck really is... So I've been listening to the Game Study Buddies... the Ranged Touch podcast network podcast, Homestuck Made This World. And very early on in that, Michael Lutz said, Homestuck is capitalism. And the fundamental thing that I think he means by that is it's the fantasy that everything can be quantified, and having been quantified can be commodified. You know, everything in Homestuck is convertible into a game token that can be exchanged for something else. Whole lot of other shit going on there, right? Very, very important illustration of a bunch of like nitty-gritty web history stuff. But Homestuck is capitalism, and it's an expression of the logics of capitalism. You can argue that it conflates... It maybe conflates Spurb with Homestuck. I think that would be more fair to say. I think it applies to Homestuck much more broadly than just to Skya. Yeah, Homestuck is a term with several referents. And yeah, the personality quiz type categorization, that's a thing that Hussey harnessed really, really well, really effectively throughout Homestuck is... I mean, it's the ability to invent a type of guy and then to get people to invest in whether or not they are that type of guy. You know, all the kids are types of guy, all the trolls are types of guy, all the new kids and trolls are types of guy. Many of them imagined, but you know, we like invented types of guy even more than we like regular types of guy. Because like then there's no one to get angry at us. Yeah, Homestuck is many things. The nice thing about the Homestuck Made This World podcast is that you can actually like listen to it and get a lot out of it without reading Homestuck. Yeah, probably not as much as if you do read Homestuck, but don't read Homestuck. It's not worth doing. Yeah, there will probably be bits of Homestuck that you enjoy. It's got something for a great many people, but like it is also let's not resurrect old Homestuck mock fights in my chat, please. I was going to talk about environmental externalities. Because through all this, I didn't really mention growth, okay? And growth ought to be a key concept for talking about capitalism. Because what happens as mercantilism emerges, right? Merchants live on profit, right? Feudalism is a steady state economy, and it doesn't really care whether or not productivity is increasing, provided sustenance needs are met. You know, are you a big guy? No, it's okay. Dodge that. Probably. This is unfavourable terrain. I'm just trying to work my way out to the beach so I can show off all the shit we've built. I think it's this way. Yes. So over here are the fuel pyramids. Because we have a power station that feeds a lot of fuel generators, and fuel generators take up a lot of floor space, so I wanted ways to stack them, so here they are stacked. They look very good in the distance like that, I think. But feudalism is basically steady state. Yes, the king and the barons want to get richer, but they don't really do so by changing land relationships very much. You know, probably this is why our multiplayer games eventually chug. All these friggin' quick-wire that's just flying around over here. All of these should be covered up to minimize lag. As should... There's the water supply. All this water that's going around at thousands of bottles an hour. Feudalism, no economic growth, right? The productivity is not increasing very quickly, and driving productivity up is not a major part of what the economy is doing. Once mercantilism comes in, the merchants are in competition with one another, because a merchant with a big enough fleet can drive his rivals out of business and take their money. And then that pressure lasts into capitalism and leads to the situation we have now, where any business that isn't rapidly growing its profits looks like a bad bet to investors. The problem with economic growth, which literally means, you know, growth is a lovely metaphor. It sounds very positive. We think growth and growing things are good. But capitalist growth always means increase in profit, which is always secured by squeezing labour. And where it can't be secured by squeezing labour, it's externalities. It's pushing the load onto basically onto the environment. Whoops, I didn't want to jump off that. And so capitalist growth kind of always means something's got to be damaged, because the Earth's ecosystem is a closed system. It's actually technically not true, because sunlight is pouring in and various forms of heat are being radiated out, but effectively it's a closed system. There isn't capacity for it to grow. So all the growth that has happened at the expense of the environment is best understood not actually as growth, but as borrowing. Right? It's a form of debt. We haven't really talked about debt. Debt is also really important to the modern form of capitalism. This is our main hub location and base, by the way. At the core of our operations. Managed to catch it at sunrise, which is all very pretty. Or sunset. Is it sunset? This might be sunset. But Earth is a closed system, so any growth is effectively just borrowing from the future. Our antecedents have borrowed from our air quality, and have borrowed from our descendants' air quality, and from the capacity of our descendants' environment to absorb pollutants. And I could do a whole thing about the system of debt as well, right? There's this almost like a stand-up comic talking point about credit ratings, right? Where if you've never been in significant debt, you probably don't have a very good credit rating. I've failed credit checks for this reason before. Because the only significant debt of my life has been student debt, and even that I don't have a lot of. I've been very lucky. And if you think of credit ratings as a measure of financial responsibility, then that doesn't make any sense, because it's financially responsible to stay out of debt if you can. But what your credit rating measures is not your fiscal responsibility, it is your legibility to the system of debt, because capitalism runs on debt and it runs on borrowing. And so what capitalist entities want to know about you is how you relate to debt. If you've never related to debt, they don't have any information on you. You are not credible to them. So we're back to that point about reputation again. And so the reason that the externalities of capitalism don't get counted is because they are forms of debt that are not legible to capitalism. This is why you need to be a bit skeptical of things like the suggestion that South American nations should charge for care of the Amazon, right? That Brazil and the other nations that hold bits of the Amazon should, instead of deforesting the Amazon, charge Western nations for maintenance of the Amazon in order to keep the lungs of the planet pumping. That's a bad idea, because what that is going to do is make the Amazon legible to capitalism in a new way. It is essentially creating a new commodity and bringing it to market, and we saw how well that worked with cap and trade. Like, the whole idea of cap and trade was, here's a commodity that we can trade on the market that will put a pressure to create a pressure to reduce emissions. And it turned out that it didn't do that, because people just profited off the derivatives. And yeah, good credit isn't everything, but that is why credit works in that way. Okay, now I think I've said everything that I could think of to say. Does anybody want to ask any more questions? Obviously, like, if you want to come to a later stream, if you think of questions later, you can always come back here some other time I'm streaming and ask them. I'm always happy to talk about this stuff on air. This is my bread and butter. Thank you, yeah. Yeah, we... this file has over 250 hours on the clock, so we've had time to set some stuff up one way or another. I have just done a quick tour of the facility. This is our like main base, but there's we've got a big power plant over there, huge aluminium factory the other side of these mountains, various other outlying things. Now I put up the Q&A. I should have put up a, what's it called? A Menti board. I could have actually like collected stuff from you, collected questions from you in the flow and answered them at the end, and I just wasn't organised enough because too many other things had to come together for this. Thank you, bird. Anyway, before I go, where did I put it? Quick announcement. This month, I am trying to get to 120 followers. I had a successful follower drive last month. I got to 100 followers, which got this stream. I get to 120 followers, I will unveil a new model, which you can see a silhouette of here. I will unveil this model. I will actually start doing the live 2D animation streams that I have been talking about doing for ages and have not done. I now need 16 more followers over the course of the month. Please consider dropping me a follow and telling your friends to do the same. I'm probably also going to do like a partial reveal on Twitter that will be connected to Twitter following because I'm approaching 500 followers on Twitter. Thanks, Sophie. Thanks for being here. And now I'm going to see if I can find someone for us to raid at the end of the stream. Who might be live that I could bring some people to? Anybody know anybody who's live? I only have big VTubers on my raid pop-up. Let me just bring up my Twitch. My PC is starting to struggle. It's really starting to struggle. Oh, Chew's live. Let's go see Chew because I've lurked them occasionally. Let's see if that works. Thank you everyone for being here. If you want to see more streams like this, let me know. I have a few concepts for them. I might do playing an open world game while talking about the problem of free will at some point. That will be the one where I get into Newtonianism. And a few other concepts that I'm still trying to pick a game for. But thank you very much everyone for being here. It's been fun. I hope it's been useful. And I look forward to seeing you again. Saturday, Lexi and I are playing Ocarina of Time Randomizer at length. Mortarboard emote and a mortarboard hat for my avatar are in the works.